Why is the Sony FX3 now a worse camera after its new firmware update? Why is it simultaneously a better camera after the update? How can you set up the FX3 a little bit better to take advantage of the new firmware in run and gun situations? What other little things have Sony done inside the new firmware that not a lot of other people are talking about? And why is this now pretty much a mini version of this much more expensive Sony FX6? That's a lot of questions, isn't it? But we're going to answer all of them in today's video. So the FX3 really now is a mini version of the Sony FX6. Kind of, with a $2,000 price difference, also with the kicker that you can actually buy this camera, and this one pretty much doesn't exist anywhere 2 years later. Now, when I say that, it's purely because of the way that this now handles the Cine EI functions. It's literally the same thing from the FX6. On the FX6, you go between the low and the high base ISOs, and now you can do exactly the same thing on the FX3. Go check out my buddy Josh's video up here if you want to take a look at how that works in more detail. He does it better than I ever could. And I've waited till this long to talk about the update because I actually wanted to use this properly out in the field. So after shooting 4 weddings with this camera now, I can actually give you proper feedback on how this works with the new firmware in run and gun situations. Super high level, look at it this way. You can only set your camera to an ISO of 800 or 12,800. You get nothing else. If it's too bright at 800, you use an ND filter. If it's too dark at 12,800, you either buy faster glass or you're screwed. That's what I mean by the FX3 is now actually a worse camera. Because if you don't know how to use it properly and you just set it up like that, you're gonna learn the hard way that you actually can't go past 12,800 ISO even though it looks like you can. The screen is going to trick you into thinking that you have more. That's exactly the same way it works on the FX6. That is to do with maximizing your dynamic range. That is why it's set up that way. Now, I've actually set mine up so that the ISO button on the top does kind of what you'd expect it to do now. It actually changes between those base ISOs. I would highly recommend that you do the same thing. If you're not sure how to do that, I'll show you right now. Now, to assign a custom button to switch the base ISOs, I use the ISO button on the top there because it makes the most logical sense, but you can use whatever you want. To change that, go down to Operation Customize, Video, Custom Key Dial Set. Find the top there, which is right there. If you want to use the same as what I do, go down to your ISO button, which is right there. Tap on it and then just change that so it says base ISO switch, which I already had it set to. When I tap on that, it changes the base ISO. Now, I will say for run and gun situations like at weddings, this is both useful and a real pain in the... Now, in a studio environment like this, that is actually pretty useful. Your lighting's not changing too often. You can really dial it in, get it how you want it. But when you need more and you don't have it, that does pose a little bit of a problem. If you shoot weddings, you'll know exactly what I mean. It gets dark very quickly. And sometimes you don't have lights, especially when you're outside, mostly because the light is the sun and it's nighttime. So you might find yourself in a situation where you want to use kind of a hybrid of both. I came up with a pretty quick way to swap between Cine EI and flexible ISO. Now, this is the quickest method I have found out there. From like 3 or 4 button taps, you can go between each mode nice and easy. That is via the means of the custom button features that we have within the FX3, and here's how to do it. To set this up is very straightforward within your camera. Click on Menu on the FX3, go to My Menu Settings, which is right at the very top there. Go across to Add Item, scroll down to where it says Log Shooting Mode, click on OK, click right, click Add to this location, it says Added. Now, if we go back to the menus and we look at My Menu 1, you'll see Log Shooting Mode is there. But to get to that, you still have to click on Menu, and then wherever you're at, you have to go and click on Log Shooting Mode. So what we can do is actually assign a custom button to pull that My Menu setting. So to do that, back into the menus, go down to the very bottom, go Operation Customize, go down to Custom Key Dial Set for Video. You use whatever button you want to use. I'm using custom button 4, which is number 2 right here. Click on that. Now in this case, I wanted to display my menu. So click on Display My Menu. Now, when I click on that, it displays my menu. I can then click on that, click on Log Shooting. If I push up twice, it's going to Cine EI. If I go back into it, if I push up twice, flexible ISO. So always think, if you want to do it really quick, I can click on 4, center button, push twice, I'm in the other one. 4, center button, push twice, I'm in the other one. It's that simple. So if you're a run and gun shooter like me that wants to use Cine EI, but sometimes you need a little bit more or a little bit less, this gives you the flexibility to go between both Cine EI and flexible ISO quickly and easily on the fly when you need to. And if you do know how to use it properly, it's made this a substantially better camera, a faster camera. Speaking of faster, the firmware seems to have just made everything a little bit snappier. Don't know if you found that as well. Especially formatting a card. It's now like the fastest camera of all the Sony cameras I've ever used to format a card, which when I'm prepping for weddings and I'm wiping tons and tons of cards, that actually comes in really useful. So thank you, Sony.
Oh, you're welcome.
And this is now the real A7S III that we never really had. I say that because the A7S III, which I'm shooting on right now, is a video camera predominantly. Then this came out. It was kind of a weird hybrid of the A7S III without the EVF and some other stuff, but it was always kind of in limbo. Like, do I get this or do I get that? Now, if you shoot video, that is the better camera by far. There is also a few other little things they threw in the update for this that you might not have been aware of. You now have focus peaking in autofocus, much like you do on the FX6. Previously, you only had it in manual focus mode, which is obviously useful because you need to see what's in focus. But when you're in autofocus as well, it's sometimes very useful to be able to see actually what is in focus, especially if it's far away. When this first came out, I got kind of annoyed by a few things, and I made videos about them.
I would like to see a way to just click on that, and it takes you directly to those settings, just so it's a little bit quicker.
They fixed that. You don't need to do that anymore. There was also this.
And now I can't have my dials exactly how I want them. There's no way for it to work. But there is a workaround.
And now they fixed that. You don't need to pull a set of custom buttons now to be able to have the camera set up the way I like, which is where you have the shutter speed on the front, the aperture on the back, and then the ISO control on the D-ring there. D-ring, D-pad, thing on the back. I always forget the name of it. As long as I know what it does and you know that it's that circular thing that spins, that's all that matters. Those little details mean that Sony is listening. They are constantly trying to improve this camera, and this camera is just getting better and better, which we like. Huge amount of chatter on Facebook over the fact that this is now a Netflix-approved camera. For most people, including me, that means absolutely nothing. If Sony sold a version of this that said Netflix-approved printed on the front with a big Netflix logo, I would guarantee it would sell very well to people that are never using it for Netflix. Kind of sucks if you had an A7S III and you bought it for its video functionality, because really now the FX3 is that A7S III that we never had and likely never will get.